Hello, thanks for joining me. I'm Christina from Proverbs 31 Homestead, and it is apple season on our homestead. Now, when we moved here about 5 years ago, all the apple trees were already planted, they were all mature, and none of them are marked, so I have no idea what varieties we have. But beginning in about, late July, going through September, we have apples, apples, apples. And so I think I've become a bit of an expert on how to preserve apples. One of the ways that we really like to preserve our apples is by canning them in halves in a light syrup, or you can use water as well, or even juice. It is so simple. It's very much like how you would can pears or peaches, but for some reason it hasn't really caught on. You don't see too many people doing this, and that's a big mistake. The one thing I will say, and maybe this is part of what keeps people from doing this, is you do need to have apples that will hold up to baking. So we call them baking apples, right? They're not going to totally turn to mush when you bake them. Because when you're canning them for a fairly extended period of time in a water bath canner, they will get mushy if they're a soft apple. So there are certain apples you can do this with and some that you can't. Look for baking apples. I'll put information on the bottom about what types of apples are considered baking apples. And if you're like me and you don't know what apples you have, the best thing to do is to just give it a try. Do one jar and see how it turns out. You can also kind of tell just by biting into the apple. Some apples are just, you pick them off the tree when they're ripe and they're kind of mushy. Those are not going to hold together. But the procedure is pretty simple. Let me show you how. The first thing we're going to do is create a syrup. Now, like I said, you can use warm water instead. You can just fill your pot with water and warm it up. I find that water, when you're canning fruits, the end product doesn't taste as flavorful. It's like the water sucks the flavor out of it. So adding just a little bit of sugar really makes a difference. And I very much try to limit sugar in my canning, but when it comes to fruit, I think works much better than just using water. You can use apple juice, that's fine. Just remember, it is added sugar. I am going to make an extra light syrup for these apples, which according to my ball book is 5½ cups of water and 1¼ cups of sugar. You could also do a very light, they call it an ultralight syrup, which is ½ cup of sugar to 5 cups of water. That's 4 cups. That's 1½. 1 cup of sugar. And then another 1/4 cup. And I'm just going to stir this until all that sugar is dissolved. And I have turned this on to a medium heat, so I can start warming up as I prepare apples. By the way, I have already prepared my canner with clean jars and warm water, and they're sitting in there keeping warm until it's time to fill them. Our apples are all organic. However, they get dusty at this time of year, so I like to put them in a tub of water so I don't get dirt everywhere. You can very much go ahead and peel these with a hand peeler and then core them with a knife. I have done that. It works just fine. But today I'm going to use my apple peeler core slicer. I have taken off the little piece that goes here, which is what does the slicing, because I don't want slices, but I want an easy way to peel the apples, a little bit easier than doing it by hand, and then I'll show you how I'm going to core them as well. So, just like when you're using this to slice apples, I'm going to stick the blossom end into the prongs and then crank the handle. But you'll see that when you take away the slicing aspect of this device, it doesn't core. So I have to core it as well. I'm going to try using this corer. It doesn't usually work, but I'm going to try it. Hey, what do you know? It's a little bit of effort, but it took that out. If that doesn't work for you, or you don't have a corer, you can very much just use a knife. I like to just cut it in half and then remove the core. And even when you do use that corer, sometimes you still get a bit of the core left here. See how I still have a little bit of peel there? I can just take that off with a knife, or you can use a hand peeler just to get that little extra bit. As soon as I have a half ready, I'm going to go ahead and put this in lemon water. This is a mixture of 1/4 cup of lemon juice to 4 cups of water, and that's going to help keep the apple slices from browning quite so badly. Now I have a bowl of peeled and cored and halved apples. They're a little bit brown. I always find that you can't keep them perfectly unbrown even when you use lemon juice or citric acid. Citric acid is just another way to help prevent browning. And my light syrup is gently boiling. So I'm going to add these apples. I'm using a slotted spoon. I'm just going to add them to the syrup. Hopefully there's a lot of steam there. I don't think you can see. And what we're going to do is just gently boil these for 5 minutes. This is a really important step. A mistake I sometimes see people make when they can apples is not to preheat them for the recommended amount of time. And when you do that, if you neglect to do that, you can end up with an unsafe product, because canning, a great deal of it, is all about heating the food all the way through to kill the stuff that makes you sick. So, if you're not preheating it as per the ball instructions or the instructions from the National Center for Home Food Preservation website, which I also recommend, your product will be less safe. Who wants to make somebody sick? So I'm just going to wait for this to come back to a boil and time it for 5 minutes. My 5 minutes are up, so I'm going to grab a warm jar from the canner. Using my funnel and a slotted spoon, after I turn off the heat, I'm going to put these apples in the jar. Wide mouth jars work best. Just make the job easier. Hopefully you can see that most of these pieces have held up really well. We're going for a 1/2 inch headspace here. Headspace being the space between the very top of the jar and the top of the food. Now once I think I have enough apples, I add some of the liquid from the pan over them. We want to maintain that 1/2 inch headspace though. And then use the handle of a plastic utensil to bubble it. You're just making sure there's no air pockets in there. I can add a little bit more liquid after doing that to get that 1/2 inch headspace. There we go. Now use a paper towel or a cloth. You want to really wipe that rim well. Put your lid on, add the ring, and put it in the canner. And then you just keep going until your canner is full or you run out of apples. Alright, last jar in. The lid on the canner. And it needs to come to a full rolling boil. Once that happens, I turn down the heat just a little bit. You want to keep it boiling, but you don't want it to boil so hard that the food boils out of the jar and ruins your chances at a good seal. And these are going to boil in the canner for 20 minutes. That's true whether you use quarts or pint jars. 20 minutes is up, so I turn off the heat and remove the lid and let it sit for another 5 minutes. Now we can take the jars out of the canner. It's normal for the fruit to float like that. Once your jars have been pulled out of the canner, put them on I use a towel on a countertop. Let them sit there overnight. Don't touch them. Don't try to wipe them down. Don't try to remove the rings. And the next morning, take off the ring bands, make sure everything is sealed, and wipe down the jars to make sure there's no sticky stuff anywhere on the outside, and then tuck them into your pantry. And those are good for years to come. After a year, they start to lose a little bit of their nutrition and color and flavor, but it's a very gradual process. So enjoy. Check out my other canning videos and be sure to visit the blog. And always, I like it. It helps if you like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. You have questions? I'll answer them. See you next time. Bye-bye.